People watch sci-fi movies and get excited by all the crazy ideas that are presented in them. Some of them even go on to become scientists or inventors, and many of these people have helped bring the world inventions that mimic what they once saw in film. In a way, these people are making a specific vision of the future happen. But some of these inventions aren't really practical and are more really a form of wish fulfillment than they are moving humanity's scientific advancement forward. But there are many inventions humanity could actually use in a practical sense that are also really cool and wouldn't seem out of place in a science fiction movie. And in the video today, let's take a look at 10 of them. Number 10. An accurate breathalyzer-type device to know if someone is high on marijuana. Today, law enforcement everywhere has a difficult task on their hands when it comes to the roadways. They have to not only deal with drunk drivers, but drivers who are high on heroin, meth, and now legally, in many states, marijuana. And this raises a really difficult question for the police. How do you know if a driver is under the influence of marijuana in a way that wouldn't instantly be thrown out in any court in the country? The roadways, they need to be safe, but it's no use prosecuting someone if you don't have the evidence that will back it up. Now, a small startup does have a device that they are testing with law enforcement that can also test for alcohol as well, but it's really quite limited. The device, it can only tell if you've smoked within the last 2 hours. This isn't exactly the futuristic level we're talking about here, but it's still likely going to be a lot of help and maybe enough to keep the roads safe for the time being. While some people might dispute that they would be safe to drive sooner, 2 hours is a pretty reasonable window of time, especially for state regulation. Number 9. Home security systems that use carefully targeted infrasound to scare off intruders. Today we have a lot of state-of-the-art security systems, but most of them are just concerned with motion detection, cameras making loud noises, and things like that. And also most alarm systems will also alert law enforcement. However, some have already considered the use of infrasound detection in order to help find intruders, and with that in mind, infrasound could help us in an entirely different way. Instead of guard dogs, actual guards, or weapons, and the legal liability that all of that involves, if infrasound could be properly weaponized, you could essentially scare people off your property very effectively. Infrasound, also known as the fear frequency, usually stirs up the fight or flight feeling in people, and in the absence of anything to fight, well, most people just run. A properly designed passive system that could detect and target intruders could theoretically use inaudible sounds in order to keep your property safe and secure, almost like a magical spell that deters intruders. And as we know, it doesn't get more futuristic than something your enemies cannot distinguish from magic. Infrasonic detection could snuff out intruders quietly and alert the police if needed, but the active component would likely scare them off before they even broke a window or got up to any other shenanigans. It might help deter teenage vandals from your property, or put it another way, it might finally get those young punks to stay the heck off your lawn. Number 8. The James Bond fingerprint gun, for which only a partial prototype exists. In the recent James Bond movies with Daniel Craig, Q gives Bond a special gun that can't be fired without Bond's handprints. Now, while there isn't yet anything like this in real life, a German company did try to make a prototype. However, it involved a separate watch, and the whole thing was all rather cumbersome. This technology, if it could actually be implemented in a way that truly worked well on a consistent basis and didn't require any extra components, could revolutionize gun safety in the modern world, and especially in America. Of course, someone looking to hurt people could still use their gun to do so, but they couldn't use their dad's gun or a friend's gun or anything like that. Further, a huge amount of gun deaths are tragically accidental, like when a kid gets his hand on a parent's gun and sadly it goes off. Technology like this would also keep your firearm from being used against you by someone who took it, and avoid horrible accidents that would scar you for life and destroy your family and relationships. Number 7. An exercise bike or bike switching station that powers a home generator as you use it. At the moment, this is the stuff of fantasy because of the amount of power it would, or more to the point, wouldn't generate. A bike-powered generator could fuel, say, the lights for a little bit, but that's really about it. Some people have done the math and it really doesn't sound like very much. However, our imaginations have always wondered about how we could get more power from our own work, and many of us think of hand-crank emergency radios as a good analogy. Still, those don't use very much power at all, and that's the real problem here. While powering some lights is within the realm of reason, the biggest reason people want electricity after a disaster is heating and cooling. Those things just require a much more significant amount of power, and thus it's actually quite difficult to get enough power to make a real difference or do anything for any significant amount of time. The amount of power you simply get from cooling or heating is probably just not worth it. However, if we could make some sort of leap forward in this field, that would be very helpful in a big disaster. Number 6. Ferromagnetic roadways and walkways for practical hover vehicle technology. Not long ago, people saw the demo of the Hendo hoverboards and got very excited, only to quickly crash back down to Earth. The Hendo hoverboard could hold several hours worth of charge, and really and truly, it did hover above the ground. It was a dream come true for many people, especially those who were big fans of Back to the Future. However, when the realities of this project hit home, we were all a little bit disappointed. Now, it was a genius bit of engineering, and it did use some clever new technologies, but it was basically maglev technology, which does require a surface with metals that interact with the magnets in order to do anything at all. In other words, it's useless unless it's on top of the right metal surface. This meant that you could use the hoverboard practically nowhere other than places that were specifically constructed for its use. However, if we had ferromagnetic roadways, we could have hoverboards, hover cars, and other hover technology. With the precision of maglev technology, we could likely cut down greatly on accidents while increasing our overall speed and efficiency at the same time, which is all a big win-win. Of course, this would be ludicrously expensive, but in the long term, if built right, it would probably also last a lot longer than our current roadways. Number 5. Researchers are looking into ways to use our own body heat to charge our phones. Several years ago, people latched onto an article about some very experimental ideas to use a small device in your pocket to generate energy from your body heat, and some magazines started wildly speculating that you would have body heat-powered smartphones before you knew it. However, several years of fast-moving technology later, we really aren't any closer on that front. The good news is researchers are looking into it now for real, and not just looking at something that theoretically could get there for unrelated reasons. If something like this could be designed, it could at least help with supplementary power. It's possible it would be only enough to slow down battery degradation and not charge it enough to go much further, but with battery technology pretty much bottlenecked, every little bit could help. This would allow us to push our phones just a little bit further without resulting to those horribly bulky and cumbersome backup batteries that we all seem to hike around with us. Number 4. If we could truly create an energy-efficient world, much fossil fuel would be eliminated. Today, there's an incredible amount of energy used that is simply untapped. This source is motion in general. Whenever something is moving, a certain amount of energy is transferred. Energy, as we know, cannot be created or destroyed. If we could truly harness all the kinetic energy from movement, especially all of our movement throughout the day, and not waste any energy potential around us, we could greatly cut down on our reliance on fossil fuels and other energy sources. One company that found its way onto Shark Tank, called Tremont Electronics, designed a special device that could help you charge your smartphone while you walk. They are working on other smaller products, but are thinking big here. They hope to one day test their technology in order to make wave farms, where energy is generated from the motion of, well, waves. That was probably obvious. With this kind of technology, we could take green energy to an entirely new level that most people never even imagined. Number 3. Affordable water filtration infrastructure that removes pharmaceuticals and other things like that. Today, the water infrastructure of some of the biggest countries, including the United States, has some huge deficiencies. And we aren't even talking about places like Flint here, just regular old America. A huge amount of pharmaceutical byproducts are ending up in the water supply. Unfortunately, many water filtration plants are not properly equipped to clean this stuff out of the water. And even those sites that do get most of it out only boast success rates of about 95%, which doesn't sound so great when you realize that the other 5% is pharmaceutical byproducts that are in your water. To make matters worse, the FDA doesn't really even have any proper guidelines on this in the United States. And there isn't a standardized technology, much less a standardized system or set of methods for getting water to a safe level across the country. And part of the problem is we don't even really know what safe levels are. It's been shown that hormones, even in incredibly low concentrations, have effects that we don't really understand yet. If someone could invent a technology that got rid of this almost entirely and it could be implemented across the country easily, this would be a big help to humanity. Number 2. Sound technology that allows you to filter and hear only what you want to hear. Hearing aids, they allow deaf people, or those who are hard of hearing, to hear. There are now special prototype speakers out there that can direct sound to an almost pinpoint degree, to the point where it will only be heard in one very small location. Now, the sound technology is fairly new and it's experimental, but with a little tweaking, the two could be combined into an incredible invention. If you could truly direct sound accurately enough, you could make a device that could fit in your ear and block out everything else except for those sounds that you want to hear. Imagine having a device where you could tell it to only listen to the TV right in front of you and not anything else that might be going on around you. You could also use it to listen to a conversation better and not have to worry about background noise. And let's face it, the reality is all of us need our peace and quiet sometimes, and this is an invention that pretty much everyone would use. Number 1. Even in the year 2018, in the fanciest cars, you won't find a truly accurate gas gauge. It's fairly amazing to think that even in the year 2018, when most vehicles are now decked out with the most ridiculous of gadgets and sensors and features, the one thing that has stayed pretty much the same is that old gas gauge. It still operates on the same principle with the floater mechanism, where on inclines you may think you have more or less gas than you really do, and overall it's going to tell you that your tank is full when it's really not that full. The truth is that your gas gauge is lying to you all the time, and apparently this is because car manufacturers think that you enjoy the crazy game of trying to figure out how much is in the tank. They also do like to give you the false sense of security you get when you think the tank is full, even when it's really not. Apparently, people really enjoy that feeling and don't like how quickly the full meter would truly go away. Listen, I believe that in 2018, people are really grown up enough to accept the truth of that, and having a gas meter that actually, works would be pretty helpful. But look, maybe the reality is this technology is just far too far out of our reach and we'll never figure it out. Surely. So I really hope you found that video interesting. If you did, please do hit that thumbs up button below. Do not forget to subscribe. Brand new videos just like this every day of the week. Also, looking for something else to watch right now? Why not check out some videos I'm linking to on the screen? And as always, thank you for watching.